Our group is the Plastic Recycler Group. Our process is, next slide. Our goal is quite simple. We want to increase the kinds of plastics the university can recycle using plastic pyrolysis. This will allow us to decrease the amount of plastic going into landfills and create a usable product that can be endlessly recycled. Oil. Next process. Next. Essentially, any plastic of any shape can be recycled into oil and back into plastic again in an endless loop. By heating it up, it'll break the monomer. It will break the long chain polymers of any shape of plastic into monomers, which will be converted into a gas. When it's passed through as a cold environment, it will condense back into oil, which can be processed into plastic, and the cycle can be repeated over and over again.
Why is it needed? 91% of plastic is not recycled. Although plastic is commonly recycled throughout Ohio State, much of that recycled plastic ends up in a landfill. Preventing even a small percentage of this plastic from ending up down the wrong path is favorable. Creating this recycler would allow us to direct a small portion of plastic that might have ended up in landfills into a system that creates oil. Oil may seem like a difficult substance to deal with, but at a university like ours, there are plenty of departments that could benefit from it. Timeline and implementation. We determined that it'll take around 13 to 14 weeks to fully implement our project. Although general, this timeline provides a good outline of how quickly this recycler can be implemented. Understanding who we need to contact and why is key for making this entire project run smoothly, as well as applying for possible grants or funding. That's why we need to spend the first 1 to 3 weeks working on this. After that, it would take, this portion would take the longest time, which would be around 2 months, which would include purchasing necessary equipment and, if necessary, assembling our own plastic recycler. This would also include gathering supplies, finding a location, and assembly. After that is finished, we can begin to collect and clean plastic from traditions locations. The cleaning step is key because poorly cleaned plastic may affect the recycler and even add time onto our timeline. Cleaning is also important because of COVID. Eating utensils have high levels of contact with people and could be an easy way to spread the disease if not completely clean. This may also affect our implementation, as we will have to adhere to any COVID-19 guidelines the university gives us. After the collection step, we can begin to the recycler and donate the final product to whatever department we deem necessary. Another important aspect of implementation is making sure that we train people on how to use the recycler. Our group will be trained, but if this project is continued into the following years, then possibly training others in sustains and people from Buckeye Precious Plastics will be very helpful. This project is time intensive, but if we work diligently, it can hopefully be implemented by this end of spring semester.
So as far as the strengths of our plastic recycler go, it provides a use for plastic that cannot be conventionally recycled, such as, the plastic utensils from the dining hall, the lids from the dining hall, and other various plastics. It provides another useful material in crude oil, which we could also donate to the College of Engineering and specifically the material science engineering groups for extra research. It reduces the plastic in landfills. In the top right, you can see a picture of the landfill that's located to the west of Columbus. Additionally, it provides a safer way to recycle hazardous materials such as medical waste, COVID-affected waste, etc. As we know, COVID has been definitely running rampant more recently, and I think this plastic recycler would help a lot, especially with dining hall waste and, of course, medical waste. Next slide, please. Some potential oppositions to our plan would be, if implemented, there's definitely some major costs that would be involved to implement this plan on a large scale. So you would have to purchase larger materials, you'd have to have larger ways to produce the heat that's required to melt the plastic down. And then you would also have to handle the crude oil, which can be costly as well. It could also pose a hazard to the operators, so you would have to definitely wear like masks that you would use around chemicals. And the materials handling, especially in the current environment with COVID, also poses a threat to the operators. Requires a lot of energy to operate on a large scale. Like I said, you have to account for the amount of electricity and heat that would be needed to melt the plastic down, and the location of a recycler is also an issue, as we would have to find a place that is secluded enough to not pose a threat to people on campus, but it also needs to be accessible enough to where we could access and use the recycler on a regular basis.
So the cost of our project is not too high. Since this is very basic chemistry lab equipment, another way to decrease the cost would be contacting the chemistry department to see if they have this material to borrow. If this is not the case, we would need to buy. We would need firstly a distilling kit, which is around $80, a flask stand and a flask, which together cost around $50, 2 hoses that cost around $25 together, and a Bunsen burner that costs around $20. And the total cost of the project would be between $180 and $200.
So a similar project that's happening at OSU right now is Buckeye Precious Plastics, which was mentioned before. They basically shred down a bunch of plastics, sort it by color, and then they press it into different shapes. They make tiles, flower pots, tote bags, 3D filament, and rope, stuff like that. So we're currently reaching out to them to see how we could work together or like shoot ideas off of each other. But in contrast to their project, our recycler would focus more on the use of non-recyclable plastics, while theirs can use both recyclable and non-recyclable. So ours is going to use primarily utensils, straws, packaging, and then that'll be made into the crude oil. The Buckeye Precious Plastics, while still having a great impact on the plastic entering the waste industry, primarily uses those plastics, obviously, that I just said that are normally recycled, so ours would have a greater impact. Next slide. So the plastic recycler will prevent a portion of the plastic waste produced by OSU from going to the landfill. As it decomposes for thousands of years, obviously, and instead give it the new purpose of being the oil. So basically, it'll prevent some harm to the environment by redirecting the resources and repurpose for further use. The student population will be involved in this process by it being their waste. So they will be the ones supplying us with the plastic. And then a secondary goal of the whole project is to engage the student population in environmental issues. And just by seeing the bins across campus could start a very good and much needed conversation, which would lead to more people involved in the cause across campus.
Our project, we decided to look into compost collection at the Scott Dining Hall. Okay, go ahead, next slide. So we wanted to find a way to make the to-go meals from the Traditions locations more sustainable. And we found that the boxes that the food is served in is already compostable, but only if it's processed commercially, so only if it's processed a certain way. So the vast majority of the containers are not being composted the way that they can be. And in the age of COVID-19, the dining hall experience is far different from in years past, and there is far more waste, whether it's in the form of plastic bags, utensils, cups, straws. And since the dining hall is something nearly everyone utilizes every day, our group wanted to see what we could do to make it more environmentally friendly just through minor adjustments. So all that would need to be changed would be having designated cans to collect the containers and a third-party company to aid in composting them, and participation of students. These minor adjustments could potentially have a positive impact on Ohio State's sustainability for years to come.
Okay, so our project is needed to reduce the amount of waste the university creates and to help educate the students and staff about the importance of composting. So like Lauren said, due to the coronavirus, there's more waste being produced, especially at the dining halls where all the orders are made to go. So instead of, using the reusable plates and getting them cleaned, we have everything that's like wrapped up into a plastic bag in a container, and there's a lot more trash. So to reduce the university's waste and contribute to a more sustainable future, the dining halls need to compost their food containers. So the university needs to work to offset their the environmentally negative impacts COVID-19 has on the environment and become a leader in the sustainability field. Also, the university needs to continue to educate students and staff on the importance of composting and promote their zero waste goals. By educating students and staff, we hope they will be more inclined to compost on their own.
So the timeline of the project is actually pretty straightforward. Because we're not directly changing anything actually going on at the dining hall, this can be implemented in a timely fashion. Our first steps would be to figure out what things from the dining hall are actually compostable. And then from this, we'll need to analyze where these raw materials will be going and how they'll be transported. We're anticipating that the amount of compost collected will be too big to only collaborate with the pre-existing composting project at Scott House. So Innovative Organics, a commercial composting facility, will be utilized for collection as well. Next, we'll get the actual compost bins and find effective spots around the dining hall to then collaborate with dining hall managers and make sure we're not interfering with their COVID-friendly operations. Then we'll call in our volunteers from No Food Waste and Sustains members to stand at the bins to ensure only compostable materials will be put in there. We will also make shifts to reduce this contamination. Finally, we'll advertise around campus our efforts from the items being composted through posters, flyers, and emails.
Okay, so for my part of the project, I had sustainability on campus and how our plan relates directly to the student community of Ohio State and their increased knowledge and engagement of the topic of sustainability. So this actually directly relates to the sustainability on campus and directly to students of Ohio State, because these bins will be placed directly in the Scott dining halls, right where the recycling and trash bins are. And honestly, like, for me, I don't exactly know like a bunch of stuff about like waste and composting, all that before coming into this project. And I'm sure that there are a ton of other Ohio State students that don't understand like the differences between the different types of waste and where the waste goes and how it's handled. And so by putting these composting bins in the dining halls, people go through these dining halls every day to study, to eat, and it's directly where they'll be throwing out their garbage. And so this will hopefully incline more people to learn more about what composting actually does, and it'll incline them more to throw their compost out in the compost bins. And so the stadium at Ohio State already has these compostable containers, and they're already going towards a goal of zero waste. Ohio State has a sustainability goal of zero waste by 2025. So by putting these compostable containers in the dining halls, this will increase the this will actually increase the diversion of waste from landfills to more like compostable efforts in reusing waste and compost. So instead of just waste being thrown away and being put in a landfill, which creates pollution, harmful chemicals in the air, it'll actually be going into compostable containers, which can be used for soil, which is rich in nutrients. And hopefully this will incline more students to research more into sustainability topics and how they can engage more around campus by having these bins in a direct location where they are every day.
Okay, so our project is strong as we're following one of the university's main sustainability goals of zero waste by 2025. So the university's original zero waste goal did not anticipate the coronavirus and the increase in waste it brought with it. So our plan will help OSU meet their zero waste goal through these uncertain times. Also, our plan is strong as it mimics the zero waste at Ohio Stadium model. By following an already approved and working model, our plan will have fewer uncertainties, a clear path for initiation, and the advantage to learn from their mistakes. Our plan is also strong because we plan to partner with Innovative Organics, which is already a partner with the university. So by working with a partner of the university, we're ensuring they know the correct protocol in place by OSU and are a trusted organization. In addition, Innovative Organics has many benefits, including a free audit, providing composting bins, and transporting composting to commercial sites. Finally, one of the strengths of our project is that the food containers at the dining hall locations are already compostable. So our project just needs to transport these containers to a commercially compostable site.
So some opposition that might exist is collaborating with the operations of the dining hall. So because of COVID-19, there's obviously a lot of new regulations, especially at the dining halls. And so this might cause stress on all different levels of the dining halls, and we want to make sure we're not adding an extra stressor. Another area of opposition would be the lack of accommodation from students to take time to sort out their trash and avoid contamination. But as learned from Matt, in the composting project at the stadium, volunteers will help with this. While talking to Innovative Organics, they highlighted that another key factor is that with the COVID guidelines, most of the food is takeout, so there might not actually be enough to compost. But this will be analyzed and is already accounted for in the timeline. Finally, with recent information on the case numbers in Ohio, COVID might not allow us to come back during the spring semester, so that would prohibit us from needing a composting plan on campus.
So the only cost we would have is the cost for the service by Innovative Organics. There's two options, and the first option's cheaper, but it's smaller scale. And this is the drop-off composting service. So basically it's smaller bins and you just take your compost, or the school would have people drop the compost off to the sites. And this charge is $16 a month. The other option for larger scale composting is the pickup service, and that's where the truck shown in the picture comes and picks up all the buckets of compost. This cost is determined from the audit that Innovative Organics provides, but they handle all volumes of compost. And since we weren't able to get an exact fee, since they provide that during the audit, we researched other companies that did have pricing on their websites, and they usually charge between $80 and $240 per visit, depending on how much compost there is. The compost bins are included with Innovative Organic service, so that's not an additional charge. And the same with advertising and training is also included with the service. And then campus volunteers will help us with the implementation of this, so that there's no additional cost there.
So for similar projects on campus, like stated before, there have been successful composting efforts at OSU, like with last year's Scott House composting effort, and it's relaunching this year, and the Zero Waste at the Ohio Stadium. The large-scale composting project at the stadium has been massively effective and received national attention, but it was hard to get the ball rolling and was very costly. Our project has the facilities to continue in the future with the plans to relaunch. The Scott House composting effort. Our plan is the right approach because it's cost effective and doesn't require any major changes to be made at the dining hall itself. This also can be sustained for years to come because of the inclusion of volunteer groups.
Okay, so in conclusion, our plan is needed on campus in light of COVID-19 regulations and the immense amount of waste coming from the dining halls. And as stated before, our project can be easily and efficiently applied.
Let's compost together as Buckeyes. Thank you.
All right. Hi, everybody. We're the To-Go Bag Recycling Bin Group. The name is pretty much the project, but just for a little introduction, we want to aim to reduce the overall plastic bag waste that's been brought on by the dining halls in recent times. We want to establish a system where we can collect them and then take them to a recycling center, and we'll go more in depth with that later on. But overall, we just want to reflect like the sustainability initiative at OSU, because I know that's been pretty prevalent in recent years, which is good. We love it. So you can go ahead and switch, you know, the
I'm trying to figure out how I can move to the next slide. Oh, there we go.
Okay. All right, so our plan, we plan on, if we do get voted to do this, we plan on initially contacting the manager of Traditions at Scott. We want to start small and see if like this would be a good university-wide initiative to take on. We want to begin a pilot program in order to determine that. And then with that, we want to discuss with the manager of Scott how to fit the needs of these dining halls while still trying to pursue the sustainability initiative. We don't want to burden them by any means by creating like an extra effort for the workers or anything, because they already are under so much pressure with Grubhub and everything that's happening because of COVID. And then we do plan on taking into consideration regulations and safety measures that have been brought on by the university itself and the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, to protect the people collecting these bags, the people transporting them, and the people who are, you know, just in charge of like collecting and quarantining them. Then you can go ahead and change the slide again. And then this might seem weird, but this is a picture of all the bags that I've accumulated since I've been on campus. And I think this is a good way to show the impacts of what our project would do, because this is just one person and I've been saving them to get a second use out of them. I've been using them as trash bags and like storage bags when I can. But obviously not every student has chosen to take this initiative, and why would they? Because it hasn't been brought to their attention. But yeah, so this is just one student's bag accumulation, and the picture doesn't do it justice. There are so many bags that I have dealt with since move-in. You can go ahead, Anna, I'm done.
Another important aspect of the project is why it is needed. We think that this project is needed here on campus because it will help the university decrease its plastic waste that has been accumulating from dining services this academic year. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, students have been throwing away a lot more plastic bags than ever as food is to go due to limited seating in the dining halls. The food is being given out in plastic bags, and these plastic bags often end up being thrown away or littered around campus. And if someone gets 1 to 3 meals from the dining hall a day, this can add up to a lot of plastic bags. So it is evident that we should try to do something to stop all of these bags from being wasted. You can go to the next slide. For the timeline of our plan, we think that we could implement this plan during the spring. We will have to set up drop boxes in the dining halls, make signage for them, organize, schedule collections, and set up COVID isolation procedures. The hardest part of implementation will likely be coordinating for the recycling pickup centers. Because of the pandemic, it's harder to recycle some items due to sanitation. So hopefully by quarantining the plastic bags for a few days, they can be considered sanitary and recycled.
So that there are a lot of ways that our project connects to OSU. First of all, our project aims to increase awareness of plastic waste as an issue and create a solution to this widespread issue, as Anna was talking about with, and Lily showed us, plastic bag waste is like rampant on campus, especially this year. So we hope to be able to facilitate a simple lifestyle change for students to be able to engage in more sustainable behaviors every day, since there are a lot of obstacles on campus for being able to recycle plastic bags. Our project also creates an opportunity for student engagement. We want to provide well-marked drop-off bins. There's some room for creative signage we could go over with sustains, even just ideas for that. A lot of involvement there. And overall, we want to educate and engage students, and education specifically connects to OSU's larger sustainability mission. So we're taking this into account. Anna, can you hit the next slide? Thank you. So there are a lot of strengths to our project. Again, it puts action to the sustainability goals set by OSU. Most obviously and importantly, it decreases the amount of plastic waste and is more environmentally beneficial, as we also want to engage and educate the student body. As far as weaknesses go, Anna was going into a lot of these. There's potential opposition, because there's enhanced effort to collect and transport the plastic bags, and there's potential additional costs within this project. And we don't want to be a burden while we try to make these sustainable changes. So we're hoping to be able to integrate our project into what OSU and the dining halls are already doing.
So in terms of the implementation costs, there are pretty much two main categories that would require funding. The first would be the cost of the drop boxes. I estimated them to be about $100 per box, but this would depend on the specific type of box we decided to go with. There's metal bins all the way down to like plastic or cardboard, and the price point varies on that. And so that would be a decision we could make down the line about what box made the most sense, what type. And then according to COVID-19 procedures, we'd need multiple boxes, so that at the end of the day, our plan would be to take the box, isolate it for the set amount of days according to university regulations, and let it quarantine until it got picked up. And so let's say that was 5 days, we'd need 5 boxes so that every day we'd have a new one that we can switch out, so we could cycle through and adhere to the COVID restrictions. And then in terms of transportation costs, this is also subjective to whichever waste management or recycling company we went with. I estimated it to be about $50 per trip, just based on trends of different companies in Columbus. And there's also a possibility that we could set something up where it was like a monthly cost. But those are our two main sources of cost for this project. And then in terms of the kind of history of this project, or whether or not anyone at OSU has tried this before, OSU Recycling does a pretty good job overall. However, there is no category that takes care of plastic bags. OSU doesn't accept them at all. So like people said before, this is kind of a big gap in the OSU Recycling program that we would be able to fill. But one thing we'd like to note is that a few years ago, Net Impact did a similar project where they set up drop boxes at dorms, the Union, and the RPAC. And so something that we could do is we could connect with the students and whichever staff or faculty kind of helped out with that to hear what went well, what didn't go well, and take that into account during our implementation. So yeah, I think that concludes our presentation. Thank you all so much for your attention and time.
Okay, so our sustainability project was the pop-up thrift swap. Our plan is to implement a secondhand clothing rack where people can donate their used clothes here at Scott or elsewhere, just depending on approval and what coincides with COVID regulations and guidelines, given that is an issue now. So for each piece donated, people can pick another piece from the rack of donations. If they don't wish to pick something right then, or the rack is sparse, a record could be kept behind the desk of their credit, and they could come back later to choose an item if they pleased. So this rack would exist year-round, ideally be self-sustaining, and be available whenever students feel like donating or choosing an item. If this version of the plan was not achievable, I think all of us would most definitely be open to a more periodic instead of ongoing option, and altering the structure to make it a possibility. Since after all, this is a fairly flexible project with a lot of room to adjust to whatever would be feasible. So this is needed for a number of reasons. We all know that fast fashion is a leading contributor to pollution, carbon emissions, chemical waste, and more, and it's known to be extremely harmful in the whole realm of sustainability. This continues to be a growing problem, especially with younger generations and their increased access to online shopping. And we all know online shopping has only gotten worse during COVID, and it contributes a great deal to the already detrimental amount of overall carbon emissions. So for there to be improvement with this issue, it is absolutely necessary to encourage and educate people to shop secondhand and locally within their own community. This would reduce waste as well as show people a unique alternative to mainstream clothing, which, as just an added bonus, it could spark creativity and self-expression for them, as well as promote small business connection and interaction. So this project would also encourage college students to avoid online fast fashion shopping, show them the benefits and fun of secondhand shopping, and divert them from just throwing away clothes they don't want anymore, being able to give them a second life.
Okay, so the initial planning for our project took 8 to 10 weeks. And during this time, we brainstormed, formulated a plan, and we talked to others to get their input and advice. The actual implementation will only take 2 to 3 weeks at the most, because all we really have to do is gather our materials to get our pop-up thrift shop up and running. It would be very possible, like, to get it set up for spring semester. All we really need is the approval to have somebody to watch the rack and keep tickets. And if we get that, then all we need to do is gather materials.
This pop-up thrift swap will allow us to connect with members of the OSU community and provide them with an easy way to shop secondhand and donate their clothes on campus. It also encourages students to become more involved with sustainability by incorporating sustainable actions and choices within their own lives. Our project will also work to educate students who participate in our pop-up thrift swap about ways to be more sustainable with their purchasing and disposal of clothing. For those who are interested, we can provide them with other sustainable ways to shop, whether it's thrift shops, consignment stores, sustainable brands, or online sites to buy secondhand.
For the potential benefits, our project encourages secondhand shopping and clothing donation, which are obviously both very important right now. And it's self-sustaining with student contributions. So once the project is up and running, like, it doesn't require much attention aside from the person that's physically like monitoring it. Otherwise, it kind of takes care of itself. And we would also provide education about fast fashion and an alternative to seek out instead of shopping unsustainably. And we could provide education through posters, infographics, random videos, or like a QR code or something that has different resources about fast fashion. So the only problems we could see like running into would be just spreading the word to students in general. So like initial marketing and communication would be like really important in getting students to actually participate, because it is really dependent upon other students. Along with that, getting like a somewhat steady stream of donations, because we don't really want to have like the same piles of clothes like all semester. We want it to be a cycle and have like new things that people can actually get excited about. And then also a problem could be just finding students to run it and just like sort of navigating how we're going to delegate power and who's going to be in charge of it and who's going to monitor it.
So the cost of implementation is actually really low and definitely attainable. We only really need rack, hangers, a shoebox, and index cards, which only is $13 to $33. So we could definitely make that happen.
So have other OSU campus groups or organizations done something similar? The answer to that question is yes. So last year, Iris Borgard's team won the Sustained Learning Community Group Project, and many of us know her as the RA on the third floor. Iris' project was very similar to ours in how it related to educating the public about fast fashion issues and having a clothes swap event in place, right? But some of the differences between her project and ours is that they hosted their Sustains pop-up thrift shop once a month in the second floor of the Scott building. And her team had to organize some initial donations to get the activity started, which in our case, we wouldn't really do that. We would just have people come in and, swap their clothing. And they also had to make flyers to advertise the event, which can be seen on the right of this slide. And at the end of the day, Iris pop-up thrift shop was a really successful event, and it actually, it won last year. So the reason why this year we didn't see it going on was because of COVID-19. But other than that, it would have definitely kept on going. Okay. So Iris's feedback. So when I was talking with Iris, she really gave us a lot of good feedback to make this this event happen. she recommended us to not use OAs to monitor the rack in the first floor, just because they already have a bunch of responsibilities as an OA, and it would definitely take time away from that. And she also recommended that we do, for this reason, she recommended that we do it like similar to her project. So having it in the second floor in the classroom, because if we have it downstairs, there's like potential concerns with people going in and like touching the racks unnecessarily, and just like, you know, they shouldn't be touching the rack if they're not going to really swap anything. So for that reason, she recommended us to have it in the classroom. And this is where she brought up the concern about us using the racks instead of tables. So she also recommended us to use the tables in the second floor, just because, again, of COVID-19, we wouldn't want people to unnecessarily touch the clothes. And we all know if it's on a rack, everybody just wants to go through it. So she recommended us leave it on the table for people to see it and not necessarily touch it as much. And the other thing she recommended us to have, and I think one of the most important things, was to advertise the event in advance, because we do want this to be very successful like her project was, and to have infographics, educational videos, or any sort of educational service being provided to the students, because at the end of the day, one of the main reasons we're doing this is to educate the public about fast fashion issues and, you know, to make it better. And lastly, and really important too, was to have sanitizing protocols in place because, again, of COVID-19. So this concludes our presentation for today. Thank you all for listening and taking the time to be here with us. I really hope you enjoy our presentation as much as we like, you know, making it a reality. So we hope you can help us make this pop-up Thrift Swap a reality. Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to our Sustains presentation. Our group is focusing on the living wall, and this is brought to you by Abby Dietrich, Isabel Johnston, Brooke Poyer, Mariah Sanderson, and Daniela Schmitz. So the goals of our living wall is to improve air quality, since the living wall would take in carbon from the air and give out O2, and then also create a green ambiance because it's a living wall, so there are a lot of plants, and it just kind of creates a cozy feel. Next is to inform the residents, preferably of Scott, of sustainability, because when people walk by, they'll be like, oh, what is that wall? And we can talk about what it's doing for the environment and sustainability. So points to consider of a living wall is the type of plants. We are considering both outside and inside locations, so we would have to consider the Ohio climate when picking plants for outside. Also for inside, plants give off humidity since they need watered, so we would just have to decide what types of plants would be appropriate. Next is structural support. Since it's a living wall, it is on a wall, so we would need to make sure that wall can properly support the plants. And then next, humidity concerns. Since they are plants, they need watered, which they give off humidity, so we need to make sure that it isn't damaging any infrastructure.
So how preserved moss works in general. So the moss is treated by a chemical such as a paraffin or glycerin that helps to keep the moss intact. And this chemical element makes the preserved moss last longer, but it also means that the moss is no longer alive. So it won't keep the air clean like live moss, but there are so many benefits to it.
So the major costs of our living wall would mainly be the moss itself and the frames that hold it. So a 24-inch by 24-inch sheet of moss from Super Moss, which is the source we decided was the best place to buy these things from, is $209.95. And then a 24-inch by 24-inch frame from Super Moss that would actually be holding the moss is $83.95. So obviously these things aren't cheap, but the overall cost of this entire project is going to be dependent on how much money we can get for the project and how big our wall is going to end up being.
So some general benefits of a living moss wall or plant wall. The main one is carbon sequestration, and this pretty much
slows like CO2 pollution in the air and helps curb like global warming and provides us all a better air quality. It also reduces dust in the air, and they work as a noise reduction. Plants, they absorb energy like noises and work as like a natural insulation. It also helps with healthier skin because the moss works with the humidity, and for insulation, it keeps the building more warm and is also more energy efficient. The living wall stabilizes moisture levels in the air and also is known to reduce stress because research has shown like interaction with plants in nature lowers anxiety levels and just generally has a positive effect on the body.
So obviously with any of these project presentations, we're going to be looking at some challenges, right? The biggest one currently being COVID-19 pandemic, which will make it difficult for us to physically implement this project, what with social distancing guidelines, delays in deliveries, etc., other things that we can't really plan for. But we can certainly work around. Another big concern besides COVID is the structural scaffolding concerns. As we can probably guess, the wall was not originally built to support a living wall with a bunch of plants on it, right? But we can still create a pseudo wall and we can set up scaffolding so we can make sure that we work around this problem. And probably the biggest challenge, that is the biggest moving variables, is that indoor plants are pricey, especially the ones that we're looking at with the preserved moss. And we may or may not have the resources to fund a project like this, depending on what we're allotted. So one possible location is the wall. No, I'm kidding. Okay, these are our actual possible locations. So one of the main indoor locations we're looking at is the entryway staircase of Scott House, which can be seen on the right. Right now, there's some motivational canvases there, but we can take those out and we can put a beautiful living wall there. This is where we're looking at our concerns with scaffolding, making sure that the wall can support the weight, that it doesn't affect the humidity, the infrastructure of the wall. This indoor location is kind of where all those challenges come in. Again, we're able to overcome them, but it's just what we're looking at. And besides this location, we are also looking at outdoor locations, particularly the outdoor green spaces between Scott and Oscar houses.
So originally we planned to do a green roof. So we reached out to Megan Meyer, who works for Higher Grounds Green Roof Company, and we informed her about our idea to make a green roof on Scott. And she informed us that the structural pieces would have to be nearly perfect for a green roof to be possible on Scott. And she also said that the water membrane would also have to be perfectly intact. So in order to find out if that was true or not and how feasible it was, we reached out to Jonathan Onen, who is the Mendoza Norton Scott Hall director. And he reached out to the director of facilities for us and told us basically that a green roof was not viable. So we continued to be in contact with one another, and he told us that a living wall or a preserved moss wall was going to be more cost effective and viable right now. So if our project does get implemented, John Onen will continue to be a major contact for us in the future.
So the actual implementation of our project is actually pretty simple because all it really involves is ordering our materials and then setting up the wall. So we figured in February we would order the frames from Supermoss, again, making sure there's plenty of time for it to arrive given the delays because of the pandemic. Following in March, we would order the preserved moss from Supermoss. And then hopefully in late March, we would be able to, in this case, if we were to use the indoor location, prepare the wall. Maybe that means moving those motivational words and then putting up the structural support, mainly in this case, just hooks, because if we just started out with moss,
That's all I would really need. So preparing the wall, that would happen in late March. And then hopefully by April, we would be able to affix the moss to the frames, which just involves actually gluing it. So it's actually quite simple. And then putting the frames up on the wall.
So thank you so much for coming to our Sustains presentation. Please reach out to us if you have any questions about a living wall, but I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day. And then the next slide is just our citations. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Our project is called the Resin Identification Sustainability Approach, or other words called Resin to the Rescue, from Brian Michelson, Elliot Wilson Woodrow, Isabel Viles, Stephen Malloy, and Jay Singh. When considering our plan, recycling plastics can be a costly process for municipalities. There are many different types of plastics, each made of different materials that cost differing amounts for a municipality to recycle, and each municipality differs on which numbers they accept and how they recycle them. They differentiate these by using what is called a resin identification number, those little triangles on the bottom of plastic items. Our project would inform the student body on the meaning of these numbers, creating posters displaying what forms of plastics these numbers represent and whether or not they are recyclable, as well as how efficient it is to recycle these products. This would serve to not only motivate students to recycle the right products, reducing strain on the Columbus waste management system, but also to show students how some plastics, despite being recyclable, are more costly to do so, motivating them to potentially change which products they use.
Carrying on from the plan, the picture above is the one we will be referencing on our posters. Our group will be declaring each of the resin numbers and their individual roles, expanding upon how they affect the environment and how easy it will be to process. In determining if the waste should be allocated to the trash or the recycling bin, the student body must consider the processing power that is necessary to recycle plastics. Unfortunately, 25% of all recycling enters landfills, and so in only recycling the most applicable waste products, we can hopefully decrease that percentage.
Looking at our timeline, we're thinking about 2 to 3 months for meeting planning and creating a poster design that's going to really catch the eye of people passing it on the street or on campus, and that's going to accurately portray the information we're trying to give out. Then we're going to have a month of consolidating funds to get the money to print our poster and then printing them. Then we're going to have 2 to 3 months of planning where and getting permission to put our posters in various places around campus. And we're going to try to target these locations near recycling bins and near trash bins as well. And we're hoping this project can be completed by the end of spring semester.
Our plan would directly impact the OSU population by educating them through the use of posters on the concept and function of resin identification numbers. This information would be utilized by the student population to make better choices with regards to what plastics they can recycle, as well as allowing them to make more informed decisions on what plastics to avoid when purchasing products. This would reduce the load on the Columbus waste stream by developing more effective recycling tactics, as well as changing consumer behavior to promote the development of products that use more sustainable plastics. Some strengths of this plan include educating people about plastics in a way that is safe and conforms with COVID-19 regulations. Another strength is the fact that posters are a relatively cheap means of information, which allows them to be printed and distributed in bulk throughout the campus for the maximum effect. Some opposition we may face when putting this plan into action include the fact that many areas within the campus are restricted, meaning that it may be difficult to get permission to distribute posters within certain buildings, as well as the fact that separating waste takes time, and many Ohio State students may not be easily convinced to put in the effort which is necessary. It also may be difficult to fit all the information about resin identification numbers that are needed to effectively convey what we wish the population to know onto one poster.
Essential costs associated with our project include buying a significant quantity of poster quality paper, as well as having each poster laminated, which sits at $60 per poster. During the initial printing process, several ink cartridges will be needed that cost around $43.99 each. Also, rolls of tape and staples would be needed to hang our posters that would cost around $4 per tape roll and $3 per set of staples. No official OSU organization has publicly highlighted the benefits of understanding resin identification codes. However, raising awareness about our project's goal could be integrated into Ohio State's Zero Waste Initiative that is currently in the process of achieving major sustainability goals around campus by 2025. Our posters can also be used in conjunction with the information we currently see around campus posted in public buildings and residence halls that cover how to properly recycle different materials. Identifying the plastic resin used in a manufactured article will definitely improve laboratory protocols around campus as well and make our research spaces more sustainable.
While the group attempted to contact several individuals, including Molly Kathleen and Eric Toman, we were not able to receive responses from them. However, we did manage to attain information from the student body. We did this by visiting several of the Traditions dining locations in order to interview employees as well as any patrons dining within who were interested in answering our questions. It was generally agreed by employees and students alike that this university, and especially the dining halls, generated too much waste and that they would be interested in learning any ways they could to reduce that waste.
Dining hall employees also accepted the idea of posters informing students about resin identification, but many believed the concept to be a little far-fetched when considering many wouldn't take their time sorting plastics. Specifically at Morrill, many employees provided their opposition to the overwhelming waste their pizza boxes produced. In the end, nearly everyone wanted to contribute to upholding waste management.